We're starting the Imitation of Christ, attributed to Thomas à Kempis, but actually when it was released in 1446, or I think something like that, it was published anonymously. And so it was after that that it was accredited to him. But it's possible that one of his students wrote it and not him. So it's 4 books in one, which confused at least one person when we were buying copies of it. But and I didn't even know that it came in 4 books because I only had this one and I assumed that was the only one. But this one is containing all 4 books. All right, so now you have to understand this book is very monastic. It was written by monastic for monastics in Christianity. So we'll run into some stuff. And I'm not going to stay true to its traditional interpretations because we're in a Vedic Christianity class. And so I'm going to kind of change up, even on this first page, we're going to change up some things and look at it slightly different. So we're looking at chapter 1, useful admonitions for the spiritual life on following Christ, our model. No one who follows me will ever walk in darkness. The book of John, chapter 8, verse 12. These words of our Lord counsel all to walk in his footsteps. If you want to see clearly and avoid blindness of heart, it is his virtues you must imitate. Make it your aim to meditate on the life of Jesus Christ. So we get a couple of things in here which are quite wonderful and interesting. To avoid the blindness of heart. Now think about what we've been talking about, that you have a choice of 2 places to live, or 2 places to set your identity. If you set it in the mind, that's in the world of the changing. That's in the world of, past, present, future, your karmas and all of that. But if you can withdraw from the mind and sit yourself in the heart, where we're taught to meditate, there you will find the shrine, which from there, as pure observer of mind, you can have a sense of your immortality. You can have a sense of timelessness. You can have a sense of infinity, because thought and your identifications with them are what make you small, are what make you limited and divided. So if you want to see clearly and avoid this blindness of heart, which means not seeing yourself as immortal, not seeing yourself as unchanging, not seeing yourself as the divine image, then his virtues you must imitate, right? And the interesting thing about this, the reason they're talking about imitation, this is going to be our first place we're going to pull in the Vedas. Christians and Christian saints and most of the practitioners that you talk to identify with Adam in his fallen state. So they'll say, we are sinners, we're sinners, everybody's a sinner, boom, boom, boom. And so from that perspective, the only way that you could be like Christ is through imitation, right? Because they don't go back to Adam before he fell, where he was the image of God. God placed his image in Adam and in Eve and in you and I. And that's our nature. So we are not looking to imitate Ramakrishna. We're not looking to imitate Jesus or Buddha or anything else. We're looking to be our authentic self. And our authentic self is God, the image of the beloved, the image of the divine. So we don't imitate those virtues. We are those virtues. What we're trying to do is alleviate ourselves of ego, to rid our blindness, that which has blinded our heart to our real nature, and allowing ourselves to become virtuous. He says, Christ's teaching surpasses that of all saints. But to find this spiritual nourishment, you must seek to have the Spirit of Christ, right? And you do have the Spirit of Christ. We all have the Spirit of the divine within, which is how we know that we need help. If we didn't already know that we were in some degraded form of our true self, we would ever have chosen to walk into religion. We would have no need for spiritual life if it hadn't occurred to us that something is off. Something something isn't working in this world. It's just nothing is fulfilling, and there's lots of suffering, and I'm you know I'm working in a cubicle farm. How can this be what life is about? So we have already this spirit of the divine within us. It's how we know that we shouldn't steal. It's not because we were taught not to steal. It's because we know that stealing just doesn't sit right in ourselves. We know that we don't, yell at our friends. Why? Because our nature has taught us that if you anger your friends, it's miserable until someone apologizes and reconciles. It's like God is within us. We usually refer to him as conscience. Oh, my conscience nagging me. Well, that's the spirit of God, the spirit of Christ within you. Sorry, my nose is itching. And this is one of those things here, is that to find this spiritual nourishment, you must seek to have the spirit of Christ. So surrender to the spirit of Christ that does exist within you. And it's a good idea to become aware of the fact that the spirit of the divine dwells within you. And we do that through silence and through just paying attention. Then you learn things. You find out why certain things in life hurt and why your vices don't fulfill you. If you pay attention, then you become more and more aware of this divine spirit that is your true identity. And by identifying with that spirit, we move out of mind, right? We move out of mind into heart, because that's where the spirit dwells. That's where the kingdom of God dwells. It is because we lack the spirit that we so often listen to the gospel without really hearing it. Yeah. So, if you're unaware of your nature, you can't really hear spiritual teaching. It stays very two-dimensional for you. It never really catches fire. And you argue about some of the more shallow material ideas that it has. Like somebody I know stopped reading the Gita immediately as soon as they found out it was about a war. It's like, what? There's war? It's not spiritual. I don't want anything to do with it. And so, not being aware of spirit, not knowing our inner self, we'll do things like that. We'll see things from an odd perspective, a perspective of our attachments, actually. And we'll judge from a perspective of attachments rather than from a knowing, from spirit, knowing from what we are. Those who fully understand Christ's words must labor to make their lives conform to his. And see, they're just going to keep coming back to this idea. You can see it this way, but it doesn't get you there, because you can't conform 1,000 different options of behavior in a day to look like Christ. If you know Christ, to know Christ, you have to know yourself. You have to know the image of God within you. And through knowing of this existent spirit of the divine within you, by identifying yourself with that and surrendering to your will, to the divine will, this is how our lives conform to his. And they don't conform because we're bending them into a different shape. It's because we're releasing him who is already within us. That word which created all of us, created everything, which Jesus was the purest incarnation of. We see that in John, the first chapter. And so we know that we are of the Spirit of God, that we are of this divine nature. And our lives conform to that through this knowledge. As we surrender our ego, as we dismantle our sense of separateness, and as we stop denying the divine will inside and replacing it with our local will or our small will, when that begins to cease, we begin to be like Christ. And in the end, it's like what Paul says, because Paul's in direct violation of this, if this was really how it was, when Paul says, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. He didn't get there through conforming. He got there through self-surrender. The Paul wasn't living in him anymore, because that was the ego-driven self. And he had surrendered that at the feet of God. He had abandoned that, as we all have in our practice. And through that abandonment, through that successful surrender, it is now Christ who is manifesting, who is always manifesting, but having to manifest through a dark mind. When the mind is pure and clear, then God manifests directly through that. That's why an avatar can say, I'm a hole through which God can be seen, because there's no remnant of any ego self that blocks or shadows or prisms the light of the divine. And within most of us mortals, us normal folk out here, the best we can do is a mix where we're 90% clear and God is shining 95% through. And it's not till realization, actually, that last little percentage goes away. Okay, here's a Beth. So Christ's words must labor to make their lives conform to his. To be learned and able to discuss the Trinity will get you nowhere if you don't have humility, and therefore displease the Holy Trinity, right? So he's just making a point about why we need to strive to surrender, that we need to leave this ego self behind. Because if you speak like a worldly minded person, your words will have no effect on anybody. You know, you'll say something and they'll look at you and like, yeah, well, when you get around to it, I'll get around to it. You know, it just doesn't have a lasting effect. And so in this world, we have to be authentic. And as spiritual folk, we especially should be authentic, because people in the world have learned in the hard way that a lot of spiritual folk aren't. And so we carry that burden. You know, people roll their eyes at your spiritual life, or like I did when Philip told me that Moksha Prana had seen God, you know. And I rolled my eyes and was like, someone's still saying that in this day and age, you know. But then I went to see her and I didn't laugh anymore after I left that place, you know. So this is the importance that we have to be authentic. Yes?
Who's Moksha Prana Swami?
Moksha Prana, it was my first teacher, my first guru, and she was the president of Sharada Math back in 1999. She died in 2001. And, you know, so I only got a year of instruction from her through email, through letter writing. We wrote letters back and forth. And yeah, so that's who Moksha Prana was. Because I was very much, you know,
yeah.
What's that?
So, but generally, we don't get to know that they are realized, right?
No, I didn't. Well, I was told that by Philip, and I don't know where Philip heard it from. Okay. But there are rumors, you know, even in the Ramakrishna order, when you're at Bell Mat, if you keep your ears open, you'll hear rumors about a brother, you know, or two that are seers, but they kind of keep them out of the spotlight, you know. Right. They kind of keep them as the batteries of the order, as it were. What is Elizabeth's question? I'm sorry.
She was asking, I think,
is the local bill, is it good to identify it when it pops up, when you notice it?
I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I don't know what it is. What am I doing?
No. She's asking.
Can you hear me at all?
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry. No, what were you asking, Elizabeth? I don't think you understand.
I was asking, is it good to identify a local thought when it happens? Like your local, you called it a local will, right?
Yeah, that's your ego self. You know, your self that desires, the self that sees life in the moment. Yes, you will come to know it automatically just by observing mind, because the one who's observing your mind is the higher self. You know, so this practice of observing mind, it's not just watch your mind. It also places you directly in the sphere of the higher self, of the presence of God within. And so that is actually who the witness is in you. The witness is the divine. And so that witness, you see, you may not know that intuitively, you may not know that emphatically, but it's the truth that when you are silent and when you are purely witnessing, you are getting a much clearer form of the witness, which is God, the divine presence, watching the mind. Now you're still going to the ego is still going to claim identity with it. The ego is not going to say, "Oh my God, that's God." The ego is going to be like, "No, that's me watching the mind." But in time, you know that it's God. As you practice, as the mind clears up. But you can also see it because when you're watching the mind, you know what is pure and what is impure. You know what is helpful and what is not helpful. It's an intrinsic knowledge of ours by what we are, because it's who we are. And so when you are witnessing your own mind, you don't have to become aware of local mind. You will be aware of local mind. You will see it because it's not natural. You can feel, if you're observing the mind, you can feel the stress of local will. You can feel the twist that happens when desire forms. You can feel the sadness of the soul when it starts pursuing it. When you, as the ego self, start commanding, "Go get it. Go get that 10th piece of cake." Normally, that's why they call it ignorance or ignorance, because we're ignoring all of these very subtle things inside that are always trying to manifest God. We shut them down, and by doing that, we become dead. We become not present, and if we continue living that way, we have to get extremely disconnected from ourselves in order to live a worldly life, because you have to deal with that. You have to deal with that hurt. You have to package it somewhere. And if you don't know what to do with it, then you tend to ignore it. You tend to put it out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, and you carry on, right? So he's saying here it's very important for us to clear that out, for us to see the presence, to feel the presence, because if you don't, then you can't be your authentic self. To know who you are is the purpose of life, and to understand what you are, and then to spontaneously manifest that. That's the whole deal. And if you're not there and you're talking about these things, your words will have no power because there's no integrity in it. There's no depth to it. And people can feel that when we talk to each other. We know that. Lofty words neither save you nor make you a saint. Only a virtuous life makes you dear to God. It is better to experience contrition than to be able to define it. All right, we're going to take a little bit of a Vedantic turn there also. This statement that only a virtuous life makes you dear to God. That's not true. The presence of the divine image within you makes you dear to God. Your nature makes you dear to God. That's why God so loved the world. All right. It didn't say God so loved part of the world. God so loved the virtuous world. God so loved the world that he gave his son, his only begotten son. So it's this notion, that this understanding, it's like our value is not in our behavior, and our rightness with God is not on our condition. The rightness of us with God is because of our divine self, our divine image, his own image, her own image, that is planted within us is what gives us value. And it's why Jesus says the shepherd will leave the rest of the flock and wander looking for that one lost sheep, to bring us back, because we are that divine image. And when we sit before God, we are right before God because of God's unconditioned love for us, because of the grace that he covers us with. So it's always important to know that, because otherwise we don't have a chance. We don't have a chance. There's always going to be some hair sticking out somewhere when we go to meet the Lord that we're not going to be aware of, or we're not thinking of, or whatnot like that. So whenever you sit before the divine in your meditation or in your prayer, or just even washing dishes, if you're thinking about the divine presence, your confidence is through grace. Your confidence is through the beloved, through Buddha, through Jesus, through Rama, through Krishna, through Ramakrishna, through Holy Mother. These are the ways God demonstrates his grace, or that grace, to us. And so your value that makes you dear to God is not your behavior. It is your essence. It is your nature that makes you dear to God. It is better to experience contrition than to be able to define it. Yes, contrition, being contrite, knowing your faults, that is a healthy state to be, because it means that you're not identifying with them, that you are separating from them. And so what happens is that you experience the love of God through your virtuous self, because you're able to see God through a virtuous self. If you're not being virtuous, or if you don't care about virtue, then your noisy mind is preventing you from noticing the quiet but continuous and gentle presence of love within you. You're distracted and poking away at other things, and your primary experience of life is fear through that. So this is why we want to be contrite in heart. This is why we want to be humble, not because of an imitation of something, but humility is ego being reduced, being nullified. So a humble person is somebody who doesn't have the ego blocking the expression of God through their nature. And a humble person is somebody who's surrendered their own will, their own local mind, has surrendered that at the feet of the beloved. To be well versed in Scripture and all the sayings of philosophers will not profit you if you are without God's love and his grace. All things are vanity. Ecclesiastes 1:2. Ecclesiastes is a great book in the Old Testament if you ever want to read one. It's the story of Solomon, who was the richest, wisest, wealthiest king that ever lived, accordingly to the book. And God gives him a boon and offers him wealth or whatnot. And Solomon, at the beginning of his reign, says, I don't want any of those gifts. I want the wisdom to lead your people responsibly. And God was so pleased with that he decided to give him all the boons. So he got all the boons. And then he decides to go through and to find out what the meaning of life is. He uses all of that money and all of that power to go and try to find out what life is about. And he goes and he tries to conquer kingdoms, and he tells why that doesn't work. He tries eating all the fine foods and having big parties, and he tries, he had 1,000 concubines and 700 wives, so he evidently got well versed in that form of pleasure. And he goes through, and just one after the other, he tries all of these things. He tries building big temples and big monuments to himself and whatnot. And, he comes to this notion, all of these things are of little use. And so you can read through it and see his way of thinking. It's where the Beatles got that famous song, da, 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 time. Anyway, I can't remember it. So to be well versed in the Scripture, that means, this is obvious, right? It's not what you know, it's how you're living. That is how we manifest spirituality. We've all seen very, very unfriendly, uncaring, unloving people who could quote scriptures all day long. That this is not how you get there. You get there by loving, by polishing that heart, so that love shines in you all the time. That equanimity of the way you treat everyone with kindness and with compassion, and always there to reach out and to give. Nothing matters except to love God and to serve him only. The height of wisdom is to set your goal on heaven by despising the world, right? And instead of putting your mind on heaven and despising the world, that's the metaphor for loving spirit and resisting conditioned existence, which is ego existence, body-mind existence. This existence in body with body-mind identity, it's our personality, and our personality, Vivekananda says, is just a collection of limitations and restrictions. And so to live a life without the freedom of God is to live your life confined to the limitations and restrictions of your mind, right? And so, it was the birds. I guess I wasn't born then. But so this idea of despising, of putting your goal on heaven, really think of that more of putting your goal on spirit, identifying yourself with spirit instead of the mind and body, and that will be heaven, regardless of where you are residing. That will be a heavenly experience to know yourself as spirit, because it will alleviate your fear, it will alleviate your smallness, and it will give you an experience of timelessness and freedom. How foolish it is to seek and to put your trust in riches that will pass, right? It's stupid. And in Swami Prabhupada way of doing it, he would look at this and he would say, why do you go and put your trust in riches and things that will pass? Because you are dumb. That's what he would say. Because you are dumb. So don't be dumb. Put your trust in things that will look for the unchanging within you. That's the thing. Stop identifying yourself by a body and by a mind and by the desires and limitations that you've chosen. Start identifying yourself with your divine nature. Satchitananda. I'm love. I'm free. I'm blissful. I'm wise. Identify yourself with the things of nature, your nature, the divine nature, and then you'll find all that you're looking for in that. So how foolish it is to seek and to put your trust in the riches that will pass. How foolish, how dumb it is to go after worldly honors and to set yourself above others, right? That's what ego does. Ego goes and constantly collecting trinkets that it can look beautiful in, and then walking around to display them to everybody. You're dumb. Don't do it. How foolish to follow the impulses of the flesh or to covet those things which will soon cost you a heavy penalty. Yeah, that heavy penalty is death. If you identify with body mind, you're going to experience death. If by the time this body begins to rot and drip off of its frame, if by then you have some semblance of the notion that you are divine, that you are not the body mind, then you can watch the body drop. You won't experience death. You'll watch the body drop and you'll be like, oh, look at that. It's true. And then you'll turn around and look at the divine mother and run to her lap, and all will be well with you, right? All will be well with you. So don't do these things. Don't look and find your satisfaction in the conditions and circumstances of the world, of the body mind. Don't look to make yourself happy. Look to be blissful. How foolish to wish for a long life. Oof. Oh boy, I read that one. I'm a little depressed. I'm a little depressed about this one, frankly. I went to see an old sadhu in Arogya Bhavan at Bellarmat. It's the old monks' home where all the old monks go to be taken care of in their last days. And I went over to see a man there who was purported to be a seer, to be a knower, to be enlightened, Upen Maharaj. And I went into his room, and he had those wonderful eyes that just burn right through you when you walk in. And he was laying down, and he looked up at me, and he beckoned me over. I was with our patient and he asked me for my hand. So I stuck my hand out, and he looked at it, and he okay, I'll tell you the whole story, I guess. He looked at it, he looked at my hand, and he looked up at me, and he smiled, and he said, oh, you have never even thought about getting married. I was like, that's true, Maharaj, but neither has anybody who's met me. And so then he looked at my hand a little bit more, and he said, you're going to live well past 100, but it will pass very quickly. There are no obstacles in the way. And so, why did I?
Swami, what did he say? You've never given a thought to what?
I've never even thought about getting married.
Ah, okay.
And so, how foolish to wish for a long life. So that's, when he told me I was going to live well past 100, I wasn't exactly excited about that. I was like, oh God, really, 79 will be enough. let's not get crazy. Starting to think 65 will be enough. So how foolish to wish for a long life, but not care whether it is a good life. To be concerned only with the present, with never a thought of eternity and the endless joy that awaits you. Right? What he's talking about here, he's not talking about the present as in presence. He's talking about quick, what is it? Quick fulfillment of your desires. Like, that we as spiritual people should live in a way. One method of doing it is to live in a way such that you know that tomorrow will be a better day because of your choices you're making now. Right? So that's what he's saying. He's saying live in a way that tomorrow will be a better day than today. If you go after your quick fixes, tomorrow's not going to be a better day. You're going to wake up with a hangover. You're going to be tired. Boom, 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 boom. So live in a way that makes tomorrow a better day. And that's your better choice, is what he's saying here. Right? So have a better life for yourself. And don't repeat the things that don't work. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, thinking that you're going to get a different outcome the next time. It's crazy how silly we are. That's right. Dome is right. It's crazy that we live that way. We think it's like look at poor Liz Taylor. She went through how many husbands? It's like, Liz, come on. After the third or fourth one, you should have gotten the idea that maybe your happiness isn't going to lay in a husband. It's like, but don't just keep marrying them thinking that it's something wrong with the husband. Happiness doesn't lie there. Happiness does not lie in the things and the circumstances and conditions of this world. Your happiness is a gift that only you can give yourself. And so find it within yourself. If you find your happiness outside of yourself, the very highest ideal you can ever rise to is slavery. So don't be a slave. If you need something outside of yourself to be happy or to be content, then know all of your life you're going to be serving that thing, because it's going to need a constant flow of attention in order to bring you happiness. So better do your spiritual work and find this beloved presence within, a constant song of bliss that is sung within your heart, that's always available to you. Find that. And then you'll free. And you don't have to run around begging the world for an ounce of happiness, begging your friends to like you, begging people to have good opinions of you, begging jobs to pay you more. Don't be a beggar. Be a person who finds joy that can be with them anywhere that they are, in any circumstance. That light of all lights. Often think of the proverb, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. Again, that's in Ecclesiastes. Be determined to detach your heart from the love of visible things, allowing it to center on those unseen. Right? These are the kingdom of God, the spirit within. Be determined to detach your heart from the love of invisible things, of visible things. So things of creation, things that can be placed in front of your senses. Don't live a life running after things that can be placed in front of your senses, because those things are not real. Those things are just a thought, right? And so detach from them. He's using the same word that we use in Vedanta. Detach from these things of the visible world, allowing it to center on those things unseen. And why can they not be seen? Because they're your face. They're your own face. That's why you can't see it. All of these wonderful divine gifts of the spirit that lie within, the reason you can't see them is not because they're invisible, not because they're hiding, but because they're you. They're the result of you being authentic, being what you are. and you can't put your face in front of your eyes. So that's why we call them things not visible, because they are things of your nature and things not that cannot be given to you through the senses. They're yours already. All right. Any questions? We'll hit chapter 2 here. All right, chapter 2, on having a humble opinion of oneself. Or how about having no opinion of oneself? Just be free of opinions. That's something that I learned early on. I can share you a lot of save you a lot of trouble in being a brahmachari. Don't form opinions unless they're absolutely necessary. Just don't do it, because opinions become the biggest source of suffering. They become the biggest source of fights and anger and brawls and misunderstandings, dissatisfactions. If you sit there and all your friends want to go to a restaurant that night, don't you dare go to your mind and figure out what restaurant you want to go to. Just don't do it. Just say, I choose to be happy with whatever restaurant we go to. That's my opinion. And that way they can take you to McDonald's and you won't be sitting there the whole time. I can't believe you lousy cheapskates brought me to McDonald's. I was hoping we'd go to the classic restaurant down the street. So don't form opinions. Don't have any opinions. And when you're thinking about yourself, just stop. Think about God instead. You don't exist. Who cares what your opinions are about things that don't exist? And your ego self does not exist. So why have an opinion about it? Why think good or bad of yourself until you know yourself? And when you know yourself, you won't be thinking about it at all. You'll be being it. You are it. So just don't form any opinions about yourself. Knowledge is a natural desire in all people, but knowledge for its own sake is useless unless you fear God, unless you have a respect for God. Now, we're going to draw a little bit of a differentiation here, because knowledge is a natural desire for all people. If it's a desired knowledge, then it's going to be the relational knowledge of the mind, of the head. It's not going to be the spontaneously available infinity of divine knowledge. It's going to be worldly knowledge. And so if it's a knowledge of desire, it has to be a worldly knowledge, because the divine knowledge is always present within, at the very heart of what you are. But again, we only become aware of it through silence. We only become aware of it through surrender. And so, but he's saying there, but all knowledge, even whatever knowledge you have, even if it's worldly knowledge, it can have some benefit if it's held in abeyance by a knowledge of the presence of the divine, if it's placed in the service of love, in the service of compassion, in the service of wisdom, in the service of God. If your knowledge is placed in that service, then whatever kind of knowledge it is will be a good one. It'll bring about positivity. But if it's knowledge for its own sake, that's when we get puffed up. That's why in 1 Corinthians 13 there, where I always read about love, after the verses that I usually read, I think it's down around like 13 or 14, there's in there, it says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Right? And so if you have the wrong idea of knowledge and you desire the wrong kind of knowledge, then you get puffed up. You become that conceited, professor who won't listen to his students. But if you're loving, then you build up. You look around to build up everyone. Your nature is to build people up, to give them hope, to give them, strength, to get them aware of their virtues, aware of the divine love that lives within them. So knowledge puffs up, love builds up. Knowledge for its own sake is useless unless you fear God. Anytime they say fear God, what they're talking about is respect. So it's having respect for God. It's not shaking in your boots in the presence of God. That happens of its own accord when you're not being virtuous. When your mind is based on body, mind, when your identity is based on body, mind, then in the presence of the infinite other, you're naturally very afraid, right? And so that's definitely what Adam and Eve felt in the garden, what they experienced in the garden after they ate that fruit. Their first thing was God was walking in the cool of the day, and normally they would have gone and walked with him. But now, because they were aware of their new smallness, because they were no longer identified with spirit, they were identified with their bodies and their mind. They felt small, and the presence of God gave them fear inside. So it's not that kind of fear we're looking for. It's a respect. So knowing that the divine is right. If the divine says something, we're interested in it. So not the shake in your boots kind of fear. An unlearned peasant whose contentment is the service of God is far better than the learned and the clever, whose pride in their knowledge leads them to neglect their souls while fixing their attention on the stars. Yes, on reaching the stars, being bigger than wanting, having britches that are too big. That's what they say. Your britches are too big for you, boy. When you start thinking that you're the one, and you're going to change the world, you're going to alleviate the problems, you're going to fix it. You've got your eyes fixed on the stars. You're not of much use. He says, an unlearned person, an ignorant person who takes delight in the service of love, the service of wisdom, the service of God, is much better off than someone who thinks of themselves as clever and intelligent. Look at these folks online running around, these guys, these alpha males, this big weird alpha male thing that's going on online. This Andrew Tate and the horribly egoistic state he's in. The poor man is suffering horribly for that and can't see the wall for the dark in that state. Don't go that direction. Love is much harder than self-protection. True self-knowledge makes you aware of your own worthlessness, and you will take no pleasure in the praises of others. Yeah, again, he's going from that perspective of being the ego self as your nature. We really reject that as Vedantists, that your nature is divine. It's the divine image. So what he's saying here is still true, but not in this respect. It's like true self-knowledge makes you aware of your own worthlessness. It's not your own worthlessness. The fact that you think it's your own worthlessness is the problem. When you come to know that it's the worthlessness of the ego nature, then you become aware of the worthlessness of the ego nature. And what do? Then you detach from ego nature. You're like, ugh, that's not me. And again, you re-identify yourself with the divine within you, the image of God that's placed within you. So true self-knowledge makes you aware of the worthlessness of the ego self, and you will take no pleasure in the praises of others, because that's the only thing the ego is concerned about, is constantly building up its sense of being. Because the ego has no existence. It's a fundamental mistake that you made in thinking that you were body mind. And by making yourself think that you were body mind, the ego forms. And then the ego's only contentment is to convince you of its continued existence. And because it's constantly insecure, because it doesn't actually exist, it will keep you constantly on your left foot. So your whole life, you're always trying to make more money, trying to get your body in better shape, trying to say the right things, trying to find the most beautiful partner to be seen with, trying to have the right car to be at the stoplight in, trying to find the best house to be seen through the windows in. This is how the ego works. That's one of the things I always noticed up on Billionaires Row. All of the houses, all these fancy, huge mansions on the first floor, they didn't have any curtains. And I was like, why don't you go through any other part of town? Everybody's got curtains or blinds up in every window. But in the richest folks, those first story windows, there were no curtains. And after a while, I understood. They want people to see in their house, to see their grand view out the back window, to see their beautiful chandeliers and candelabras and fancy furniture and beautiful paintings. That's the only reason those things have any value to those people, is because of what they say about their ego self. Then they find that contentment, or are searching for their contentment in it. But you can know they're out there buying more paintings even though they've already got their house full of them, because those things cannot fulfill us. They cannot give us what we're looking for. That's a gift you can only give yourself from within. If your knowledge encompasses the universe and the love of God is not in you, what good will it do you in God's sight? He will judge you according to your actions, right? And the benefit of that is that he's judging you. He is judging you, is not really what's going on, right? Because you have the divine within you. So he is teaching you through judgment. He's teaching you through a constant upbringing. He's raising you even now. So if your knowledge is encompasses the whole universe and the love of God is not in you, right? Your awareness of the presence isn't there. You know, you can have all the knowledge of the world, you can have everything in the world, and you'll still be starving. You'll still be hungry until you find that well of love, the divine within, that presence. Until you know that presence, you will not know satisfaction. You will not know contentment. This is the gift to yourself. And that discontent that you find continually in the world, that is the judgment of God that you're experiencing it. And it's not a judgment because he's itching to put you on the barbecue. It's that he's itching to get you to see. Look. This isn't feeding you. Look. And we're like, stop judging me. Stop judging me. It's like, no, listen to this. I'm not judging you. I'm judging what you're doing. I'm trying to get the word across to you. Don't do this. I've tried to tell you 1,000 times. Actually, I've used your own mouth every Saturday morning when you wake up after a night bombing in the clubs. I've woken you up and I said, look at your headache. Look, don't ever do this. Oh, yeah, I'm never going to do this again. So, that's why I'm telling you, so that you'll say you'll never do it again. I just want you to mean it. So this is the judgment of God. And I'm going to drive these things home because in Christianity, it's been very wrongly taught for many, many, many years. They've created this being in the sky that's pointing his finger, judging you about your stuff, not to make you a better person, but to condemn you to hell. Nonsense. Absolute buggery. If that's a proper word, I don't know. But it has no use. It has no use. In 1 Corinthians 13, I bring this point home. Love keeps no record of wrongs. 1 John, God is love. So God is not keeping a record of your wrongs. So it's not, don't let this make you afraid. That's the institution that's talking right there. The institution wants you to be afraid so that you continue to tithe. If your knowledge encompasses the universe and the love of God is not in you, what good will it do you in God's sight? He led you according to your actions. An overweening desire for knowledge brings many distractions and much delusion, right? Many distractions and much delusion. You start that famous point, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? It's like you start arguing about things that don't matter. You start looking for difference between your religion and everybody else's religion, your idea of God and everybody else's idea of God, instead of looking for the sameness, which is what? Love. And what's the most important in all the religions, at least all the ones that I've seen, all the ones I've opened a book about, all of them, love is the primary. Love is the one most important thing. Love does not divide. Love does not look for difference. Love does not look for fault. Love does not delight in evil, Love is patient. Love is kind. Love always hopes, always cares. Love never fails. This is what we're talking about, right? And so he's saying here, if you go for knowledge, if you're trying to be the smartest kid in the room, if you're the smartest philosopher at the campus, the best professor at the campus, he says it's going to cause you much distraction because you're going to start chasing after things that don't matter. And it's going to cause you much delusion. And what's that delusion? That you're great because you've stuffed a lot of stuff in your head. That's not what's going to make you great. Nobody's going to look at your corpse and to think, oh, look how much he knows. Look at how all those books benefited him. Doesn't he look happy? All right. So an overweening desire for knowledge brings many distractions and much delusion. Many like to be considered learned and to be praised for their wisdom. How much knowledge there is, which adds nothing to the good of the soul. To spend yourself on worldly pursuits which do nothing to further your eternal salvation is unwise. At the very least, it's unwise. So, look at the things he's saying here. What do you spend your time on during the day? Are these things that are decorating a corpse? Is your life during the day about decorating your corpse? Or is it about finding and gifting yourself the love of God that dwells within? Finding your satisfaction in being an authentic human being that manifests that divine image at the root of being a human being, and responds to the world from its nature, from love, from wisdom, from a forever existence. It is useless to spend much time in talking. Only a holy life and a good conscience will ease your mind and satisfy your soul, enabling you to face God with confidence. Yes, right. Because as you clear up your life, as you start ceasing to pursue these meaningless things, you start to pay more attention to your internal nature, to the presence of the Lord within. And the first thing that the presence of the Lord presents to you is unconditioned love and infinite grace. And in the face of infinite love and unconditioned grace, or vice versa, you find your confidence. Not because you're doing good, but because you know that God is within you and that God is inseparable from you and that there is none such thing as being apart from God, because you cannot separate yourself from your existence. You cannot separate yourself from your love. You cannot separate yourself from your intelligence. So God will never separate herself from you. Cannot be done. But you can become unaware of God and unaware of presence, and you will suffer the same. So, all right, we're going to stop there for tonight.